Welcome back to our story channel. Please subscribe and let's dive in. Princess Anastasia Romanova, a descendant of the once mighty Tsars, felt like a ghost in her own life. The grandeur of the Winter Palace, with its opulent halls and echoing silence, was a constant reminder of a past that was both glorious and tragic. The revolution had swept away her family's power, but it hadn't erased their legacy, nor had it freed her from the expectations that came with it. Anastasia was a paradox, a princess born into privilege, yet burdened by a deep empathy for the common people. She was educated, intelligent, and possessed a sharp wit that she often concealed behind a veil of polite deference. She spoke fluent French, German, and English, devoured books on history, philosophy, and art, and yet, she felt utterly useless. She spent her days attending diplomatic luncheons, charity galas, and art exhibitions, a carefully curated performance of royal decorum. But behind the practiced smile, her heart ached for something real, something meaningful. She longed to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the palace, to breathe the fresh air of the countryside, to connect with the lives of ordinary Russians. Her grandmother, the Dowager Empress Maria, a formidable woman who still clung to the vestiges of the old regime, was her constant companion and guide. Maria drilled Anastasia in the intricacies of courtly etiquette, the importance of maintaining appearances, and the sacred duty of preserving the Romanov legacy. "You are a Romanov, Anastasia," she would say, her voice laced with steel. "You must never forget that. Your actions reflect on the entire family." Anastasia understood the weight of her lineage, but she couldn't reconcile it with her own growing sense of unease. The opulent lifestyle, the endless parade of sycophants, and the blatant disregard for the struggles of the common people filled her with a deep sense of guilt. One evening, while attending a lavish ball at the Peterhof Palace, Anastasia found herself drawn to a corner of the ballroom, away from the swirling dancers and the polite chatter. She gazed out at the moonlit gardens, feeling a profound sense of isolation. A young man, a diplomat from the French embassy, approached her, his eyes filled with admiration. He began to speak of the beauty of the palace, the splendor of the Russian court, but Anastasia barely heard him. Her gaze was fixed on the distant horizon, on the unknown world that lay beyond the gilded walls of her prison. "Princess," the diplomat said, his voice tinged with concern, "is something troubling you?" Anastasia forced a smile. "No, nothing at all," she replied. "I was simply admiring the view." But the truth was, she was yearning for something more, something she couldn't quite define. A purpose, a passion, a connection to the real world. Back in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim was witnessing firsthand the growing unrest among the population. The government, riddled with corruption and beholden to foreign interests, seemed deaf to the cries of its people. Poverty was rampant, healthcare was inadequate, and education was a luxury few could afford. Ibrahim, as a captain in the army, was tasked with maintaining order, but his conscience wouldn't allow him to blindly enforce the status quo. He saw the injustice, the suffering, and he knew that something had to change. He began to discreetly meet with other officers who shared his concerns, discussing the possibility of a coup. They knew the risks were enormous, but they believed that the future of Burkina Faso was at stake. One evening, under the cloak of darkness, Ibrahim met with a group of village elders in a remote clearing. They spoke of the hardships they faced, the lack of opportunities for their children, and the broken promises of the government. "We are tired of being ignored," one of the elders said, his voice trembling with emotion. "We are tired of watching our children starve. We need change, Captain Traore. We need hope." Ibrahim listened intently, his heart heavy with sorrow. He knew that the elders spoke for the entire nation. He looked into their eyes, saw the desperation in their faces, and made a silent vow to do everything in his power to bring about a better future for Burkina Faso. He told them of his plans, of the possibility of a military intervention, and asked for their support. The elders, after a long discussion, agreed to stand with him. They knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger, but they were willing to take the risk, for the sake of their children and their grandchildren. Meanwhile, in Russia, Anastasia was becoming increasingly disillusioned with the world she inhabited. She started secretly volunteering at a local hospital, helping to care for the sick and the poor. She was shocked by the conditions she witnessed, the lack of resources, and the suffering of the patients. She realized that the opulent lifestyle she had always known was built on the backs of the poor and the marginalized. The realization filled her with a burning sense of injustice. She began to question the very foundations of her privilege, the legitimacy of the Romanov legacy. She started to research the history of Russia, the causes of the revolution, and the struggles of the common people. She devoured books on social justice, political reform, and economic equality. She became convinced that Russia needed fundamental change, a transformation that would address the deep-seated inequalities that plagued the nation. Her grandmother, the Dowager Empress Maria, disapproved of her activities, warning her that she was associating with dangerous radicals and undermining the stability of the monarchy. "You must be careful, Anastasia," she said, her voice filled with concern. "You are playing with fire. These people are dangerous. They want to destroy everything we hold dear." But Anastasia refused to be deterred. She believed that she had a moral obligation to use her position to help those in need. She knew that she was taking a risk, but she was willing to face the consequences, for the sake of her conscience. The world was becoming increasingly interconnected, even in the early 21st century. News traveled faster, ideas spread further, and the seeds of change were being sown in every corner of the globe. Ibrahim, in Burkina Faso, was closely following the events unfolding in Russia. He was fascinated by the history of the Romanov dynasty, the revolution, and the struggles of the Russian people. He saw parallels between the situation in Russia and the situation in Burkina Faso, a corrupt and oppressive regime, a vast disparity between the rich and the poor, and a growing sense of discontent among the population. He read about Princess Anastasia, her growing involvement in social causes, and her outspoken criticism of the government. He admired her courage, her compassion, and her willingness to challenge the status quo. He saw in her a kindred spirit, someone who understood the importance of fighting for justice and equality. He knew that their worlds were vastly different, that the chances of them ever meeting were slim to none. But he couldn't help but feel a connection to her, a sense of shared purpose. He believed that they were both fighting for the same thing, a better world for their people. Meanwhile, in Russia, Anastasia was becoming increasingly aware of the political and economic challenges facing developing nations, particularly in Africa. She read reports on poverty, disease, and political instability, and was deeply moved by the suffering she saw. She came across articles about Burkina Faso, its struggle for independence, and the challenges it faced in building a stable and prosperous nation. She learned about Captain Ibrahim Traore, his commitment to social justice, and his efforts to improve the lives of his people. She was impressed by his leadership, his integrity, and his unwavering dedication to his country. She saw in him a symbol of hope, a beacon of light in a dark world. She felt a strange pull towards him, a sense of connection that she couldn't explain. She knew that he was a man of action, a man who was willing to risk everything for what he believed in. And she admired him for it. She began to secretly donate to charities that supported education and healthcare in Burkina Faso, hoping to make a small difference in the lives of those who were struggling. She knew that it was just a drop in the ocean, but she felt compelled to do something, anything, to help. In Burkina Faso, the time for action had come. Ibrahim, with the support of his fellow officers and the village elders, launched a military coup. The operation was swift and decisive. The corrupt president was overthrown, and a transitional government was established, led by Ibrahim himself. The streets of Ouagadougou erupted in celebration. People danced, sang, and chanted Ibrahim's name. They saw him as their savior, the man who had finally broken the chains of oppression and given them a chance for a better future. Ibrahim, however, knew that the real work was just beginning. He faced enormous challenges, a bankrupt economy, a divided society, and the threat of foreign intervention. He needed to unite the country, rebuild its infrastructure, and establish a stable and just government. He immediately set about implementing a series of reforms, fighting corruption, improving healthcare and education, and promoting economic development. He listened to the voices of the people, sought their input, and made decisions based on their needs. He knew that he couldn't do it alone. He needed the support of the international community, but he was wary of foreign powers who sought to exploit Burkina Faso's resources for their own benefit. He reached out to Russia, seeking assistance in developing Burkina Faso's infrastructure and strengthening its military. He saw Russia as a potential ally, a country that had its own history of struggle and resilience. Meanwhile, in Russia, Anastasia watched the events unfolding in Burkina Faso with growing interest. She was impressed by Ibrahim's leadership, his vision, and his commitment to social justice. She saw in him a true revolutionary, a man who was not afraid to challenge the established order. She used her influence to advocate for increased aid to Burkina Faso, arguing that it was in Russia's best interest to support a country that was committed to fighting corruption and promoting economic development. Her efforts were met with resistance from some quarters, particularly from those who saw Ibrahim as a dangerous radical. But Anastasia persisted, arguing that Russia had a moral obligation to help those in need. The Russian government, after much debate, agreed to provide Burkina Faso with a substantial aid package, including financial assistance, technical expertise, and military equipment. Ibrahim was grateful for the support, but he knew that he needed more than just material assistance. He needed to build a strong and lasting relationship with Russia, one based on mutual respect and shared interests. He decided to send a delegation to Moscow, led by his trusted advisor, to discuss further cooperation between the two countries. He also included a personal letter to Princess Anastasia, expressing his gratitude for her support and inviting her to visit Burkina Faso. Anastasia was deeply touched by the letter. She had never met Ibrahim, but she felt a strong connection to him, a sense of shared purpose. She knew that her grandmother, the Dowager Empress Maria, would disapprove of her associating with a revolutionary leader, but she couldn't ignore the call of her heart. She decided to accept Ibrahim's invitation, secretly planning a trip to Burkina Faso. She knew that it would be a dangerous undertaking, but she was willing to take the risk, for the sake of her conscience and her growing admiration for the Sahel son. She informed the Russian president of her intended visit, couching it as a fact-finding mission to assess the impact of Russian aid on the ground. The president, intrigued by her interest and seeing a potential diplomatic opportunity, reluctantly agreed, assigning a small security detail to accompany her. Anastasia's arrival in Ouagadougou was met with great fanfare. The people of Burkina Faso welcomed her as a friend, a symbol of hope and solidarity. She was impressed by their warmth, their resilience, and their unwavering faith in the future. Ibrahim met Anastasia at the airport. The moment their eyes met, they both felt a spark, a connection that transcended continents and cultures. He was struck by her beauty, her intelligence, and her genuine concern for the well-being of his people. She was captivated by his strength, his humility, and his unwavering commitment to justice. He showed her around the country, introducing her to the people, the land, and the challenges they faced. She visited hospitals, schools, and farms, listening to the stories of ordinary Burkinabes and witnessing firsthand the impact of poverty and inequality. She was deeply moved by what she saw, and she became even more determined to help Burkina Faso achieve its full potential. They spent hours talking, sharing their thoughts, their dreams, and their fears. They discovered that they had much in common, despite their vastly different backgrounds. They both believed in the power of education, the importance of social justice, and the need for international cooperation. They both yearned for a world where everyone had the opportunity to live a life of dignity and purpose. As they spent more time together, their friendship deepened, and their admiration for each other grew. They found themselves drawn to each other, both intellectually and emotionally. They were two souls, from opposite sides of the world, united by a shared vision and a growing affection. One evening, while watching the sunset over the Sahel, Ibrahim turned to Anastasia and said, "I never thought I would meet someone like you, someone who understands my dreams and shares my vision." Anastasia looked into his eyes and replied, "And I never thought I would find a place where I truly belong, a place where I can make a difference." They held each other's gaze for a long moment, a silent acknowledgement of the growing feelings between them. The distance between them seemed to shrink, the cultural barriers seemed to fade away, and they both knew that something special was happening. Their growing closeness did not go unnoticed. Whispers of romance began to circulate among the Russian delegation, the Burkina government officials, and the international press. Some saw it as a positive development, a sign of closer ties between Russia and Burkina Faso. Others were more skeptical, viewing it as a potential diplomatic liability. The Dowager Empress Maria, upon hearing the rumors, was furious. She saw Ibrahim as a dangerous revolutionary, an unsuitable match for a Romanov princess. She demanded that Anastasia return to Russia immediately, warning her that she was jeopardizing the family's reputation and the stability of the monarchy. Back in Russia, political circles buzzed with speculation. Some saw the potential for a powerful alliance, a strategic partnership that could benefit both nations. Others viewed it with suspicion, concerned about the implications of a Romanov princess becoming involved with a revolutionary leader. Conservative elements in Russia, still clinging to the old order, saw it as a betrayal of the Romanov legacy, a dangerous liaison with a radical element. Adding to the complexity, other nations were watching closely. Western powers, wary of Russia's growing influence in Africa, saw the budding relationship as a strategic challenge, a move to extend Russia's sphere of influence. Anastasia, torn between her duty to her family and her growing love for Ibrahim, was unsure of what to do. She knew that their relationship would face many challenges, but she was unwilling to give up on it without a fight. Ibrahim, too, was aware of the political implications of their relationship. He knew that it could complicate his efforts to build a stable and prosperous nation. But he couldn't deny his feelings for Anastasia, nor could he ignore the potential benefits of a closer relationship with Russia. He sat down with Anastasia and discussed the challenges they faced. He told her of the risks involved, the potential for political backlash, and the sacrifices they would have to make. "I don't want to put you in danger, Anastasia," he said, his voice filled with concern. "I don't want to jeopardize your family's reputation, or your future." Anastasia looked into his eyes and replied, "I know the risks, Ibrahim. But I'm willing to face them, for you, for Burkina Faso, and for the chance to build a better world." Despite the challenges, their love continued to grow. They found solace in each other's company, strength in each other's support, and inspiration in each other's dreams. One starlit night, Ibrahim took Anastasia to a sacred baobab tree, a symbol of strength, resilience, and longevity in Burkina culture. He knelt before her, offering her a simple ring made of woven grass, a traditional symbol of commitment and love. "Anastasia," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "I love you more than words can say. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, building a future for our people, a future of peace, justice, and prosperity. Will you marry me?" Anastasia's eyes filled with tears. She had dreamed of this moment, but she had never dared to believe that it could actually happen. She reached out and took his hand, her heart overflowing with love. "Yes, Ibrahim," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I will marry you." They embraced under the ancient baobab tree, their love a beacon of hope in a world of uncertainty. The news of their engagement spread like wildfire, sparking a mixture of joy, excitement, and controversy around the world. The engagement of Ibrahim and Anastasia threw the already complex geopolitical landscape into further turmoil. The Russian government, while publicly supportive, was privately concerned about the potential implications of the marriage. The president summoned Anastasia back to Moscow for a series of meetings, where she was grilled on her motivations and the potential impact on Russia's image. Anastasia, however, stood her ground, arguing that her marriage to Ibrahim would strengthen ties between Russia and Burkina Faso, promote stability in the region, and advance the cause of social justice. She skillfully navigated the political minefield, appealing to the president's sense of pragmatism and his desire to enhance Russia's standing on the world stage. Ibrahim, meanwhile, was facing his own challenges at home. Some members of his government were concerned that his relationship with Anastasia would make him vulnerable to foreign influence. Others worried that it would alienate more conservative elements of Burkina society. He addressed these concerns head-on, assuring his people that his commitment to Burkina Faso was unwavering. He emphasized the potential benefits of a closer relationship with Russia, particularly in terms of economic development and military assistance. He also reached out to community leaders, religious figures, and tribal elders, seeking their support and explaining his vision for a unified and prosperous Burkina Faso. He stressed that Anastasia's love for him was genuine and that she was committed to helping the Burkina people. Despite the challenges, Ibrahim and Anastasia were determined to get married. They decided to hold 2 ceremonies, one in St. Petersburg, to appease Anastasia's family and honor her heritage, and one in Ouagadougou, to celebrate their love with the people of Burkina Faso. The wedding in St. Petersburg was a grand affair, attended by dignitaries from around the world. Anastasia wore a stunning gown, a blend of traditional Russian and Burkina designs. The Dowager Empress Maria, while still harboring reservations, offered her granddaughter a blessing, acknowledging the strength of her love for Ibrahim. The wedding in Ouagadougou was a more intimate affair, a celebration of Burkina culture and traditions. Anastasia wore a colorful African dress, adorned with intricate beadwork. The ceremony was held under the shade of the sacred baobab tree, surrounded by the warmth and love of the Burkina people. Ibrahim and Anastasia exchanged vows in both Russian and French, pledging to love and support each other for the rest of their lives, to work together to build a better world, and to honor the traditions of both their cultures. The wedding was a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of love to transcend borders and cultures. It was a celebration of unity, a fusion of 2 worlds, and a promise of a brighter future for Burkina Faso and for the world. Following their marriage, Anastasia fully embraced her new role as a champion for Burkina Faso and a bridge between Russia and Africa. She established a foundation dedicated to promoting education, healthcare, and economic development in Burkina Faso. She traveled extensively throughout the country, visiting remote villages, meeting with local communities, and listening to their concerns. She used her platform to advocate for increased international aid to Burkina Faso, highlighting the country's progress in fighting corruption, promoting democracy, and improving the lives of its people. She also worked to strengthen cultural ties between Russia and Burkina Faso, organizing exchange programs, art exhibitions, and educational initiatives. Anastasia's efforts had a significant impact on Burkina Faso. Schools were built, hospitals were equipped, and small businesses were launched, creating opportunities for thousands of Burkinabes. She became a beloved figure in the country, revered for her compassion, her dedication, and her unwavering commitment to social justice. Ibrahim, meanwhile, continued to lead Burkina Faso with wisdom and determination. He implemented a series of bold economic reforms, attracting foreign investment, diversifying the economy, and creating jobs. He also strengthened ties with neighboring countries, promoting regional cooperation and stability. He faced numerous challenges: political opposition, economic hardship, and the ever-present threat of terrorism. But he remained steadfast in his commitment to his people, always putting their needs first. He often sought Anastasia's counsel, valuing her insights and her perspective on international affairs. She became his trusted advisor, a sounding board for his ideas, and a source of unwavering support. Their marriage was a true partnership, a collaboration of 2 strong and compassionate individuals who were dedicated to making the world a better place. But their idyllic world was soon threatened by dark forces. Powerful interests, both within and outside Burkina Faso, saw their success as a threat to their own power and influence. Western powers, concerned about Russia's growing influence in Africa, began to exert pressure on Burkina Faso, withholding aid and imposing economic sanctions. Corrupt politicians and business leaders, who had lost their power and privileges under Ibrahim's leadership, plotted to undermine his government and restore the old order. Terrorist groups, seeking to destabilize the region, launched attacks on civilian targets, spreading fear and chaos. Ibrahim and Anastasia found themselves caught in a web of intrigue, surrounded by enemies who were determined to destroy them and their vision for a better future. The situation in Burkina Faso deteriorated rapidly. The economy faltered, social unrest increased, and the threat of violence loomed large. Ibrahim faced mounting pressure to resign, but he refused to abandon his people in their time of need. He vowed to fight for Burkina Faso, to defend its sovereignty, and to protect its people from those who sought to exploit them. Anastasia stood by his side, offering her unwavering support and using her influence to rally international support for Burkina Faso. She condemned the economic sanctions, denounced the terrorist attacks, and called for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. But their efforts were not enough to stem the tide of events. A military coup, backed by foreign powers and corrupt politicians, was launched against Ibrahim's government. Ibrahim and Anastasia were forced to flee Ouagadougou, seeking refuge in a remote village in the countryside. They knew that they were in grave danger, but they were determined to continue the fight for Burkina Faso. They rallied their supporters, organized resistance groups, and launched a campaign to expose the coup leaders and their foreign backers. They used social media, clandestine radio broadcasts, and word of mouth to spread their message of hope and resistance. Their efforts inspired a popular uprising against the coup leaders. People took to the streets, demanding the restoration of democracy and the release of Ibrahim and Anastasia. The coup leaders responded with brutal force, cracking down on the protests, arresting dissidents, and imposing a state of emergency. But the people of Burkina Faso refused to be silenced. They were willing to risk their lives for the sake of freedom and justice. Anastasia, despite the danger, refused to leave Burkina Faso. She felt a deep sense of responsibility to the Burkina people, a commitment to stand by them in their time of need. She used her international connections to expose the human rights abuses committed by the coup leaders, appealing to the United Nations, the European Union, and other international organizations to intervene. She became a symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope for the Burkina people. Her courage and her compassion inspired millions around the world. Ibrahim knew that the coup leaders were determined to capture him and silence him forever. He also knew that his presence in Burkina Faso was putting Anastasia in grave danger. He made a difficult decision to surrender to the coup leaders in exchange for Anastasia's safety and a guarantee of free and fair elections. Anastasia was heartbroken by his decision, but she understood his reasoning. She knew that he was sacrificing himself for the sake of his people. Ibrahim was arrested and imprisoned by the coup leaders. He was subjected to torture and abuse, but he refused to renounce his beliefs or betray his people. He was eventually put on trial, accused of treason and corruption. The trial was a sham, a kangaroo court designed to legitimize the coup and silence Ibrahim forever. Despite the overwhelming odds, Ibrahim used the trial as an opportunity to speak. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, and comment.